What's up? You guys want to hang out on a Thursday morning? A little Thursday morning edition of the Panther-Lair Show. Not doing it at night, doing it in the not the middle of the day, but the morning. It's something a little bit different. Just had to mix it up this week due to some schedule conflicts. Maybe some of you guys will come and hang out on a Thursday morning. Maybe you won't, but either way, we'll sit here and talk for a little while, half hour, 45 minutes, an hour, however long we want to talk about Pitt sports. We will do that. We've done these morning live shows a couple times in the past. Sometimes after a Thursday night football game, we do sort of a post-game recap the next morning. We've done signing day live shows. Obviously there's news going on there. And if something like big breaks, like I think when Heather Light got fired, we did a live show that morning just to react to the news. And we've certainly done those along the way, but this is the first sort of regularly scheduled weekly live show that we've done here on a weekday morning. And who knows, if it goes well, maybe we'll switch to the mornings all the time, get away from the late night Panther-Lair shows and start doing it in the morning. I'm guessing we'll be back to Wednesday night next week. I have to check the schedule. I don't think I have anything going on next Wednesday night, but I'm guessing we'll get back to the regularly scheduled program time next week. But for now, figure we just hang out, talk a little Pitt sports here on a Thursday morning. Listen, while we're all getting started and everybody's sort of drifting in, like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you can never miss any of our Pitt video content, whether it's the daily morning Pitt videos. We had a nice conversation about Pitt football this morning on the morning Pitt, talking about the skill position players, the wide receivers and the running backs in particular, kind of what those positions look like, what Pitt added this offseason, and how that's all, how those spots are shaping up heading into the fall. Or really heading into spring camp, really, since that's coming up a little bit sooner than the fall football season. But we've got the daily morning Pitt shows. We have our weekly live show that we typically do on Wednesday nights at 8:30. We're doing it here on a Thursday morning at 10:30. We have post-game shows sometimes in the fall, occasionally through hoops. We haven't done any hoops post-game shows yet. Maybe we should do one after the Notre Dame game. We'll see. We'll make a plan for that as the time as Saturday gets a little bit closer. And then we have press conferences, post-game shows, all those kinds of things. It's all the Pitt video content you need is right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And the upside to subscribing is you can turn on notifications. So if we have a day like today and yesterday where we change something that we typically have scheduled, you will know because we will switch it up. You'll get a notification. It says, hey, Panther-Lair is live now. So like this video and subscribe, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And that way you can never miss any of our Pitt video content. All right, so Pitt basketball topic du jour, although certainly anything you want to talk about, we can get into as well. Jump in the chat screen right over there to the right side of the screen. You can post your comments and questions, and we'll talk about what you want to talk about. But I think Pitt basketball is sort of front of mind right now. Panthers heading into a game on Saturday at Notre Dame, very much a winnable game, very much a game they should win, and a game that would I believe, let me see what happened. This should still be a quad 2 game, but let me double check on where Notre Dame is after getting thumped by SMU last night. Notre Dame is 108. Let me think. I think that still keeps it in the quad 2 range as a road game. I always forget what the ranges are. I should have this written down. I should know all the different ranges and things like that. But let me see. Yeah, quad 2 game, if you're playing a game on the road against a team ranked in the net between 76 and 135. So Notre Dame dropped a couple spots to whatever I just said, 108 or something like that. But that keeps it in the quad 2 range. So it's a quad 2 game for Pitt, a quad 2 opportunity, but playing against a Notre Dame team that's not very good, has really been struggling of late. A couple days ago, Micah Shrewsbury, the head coach, went on a rant about, if you're not, if you're not here now, don't come back when we're winning because we're going to get this turned around. He went on this whole thing, and I think their crowd was even smaller last night for the game against SMU. I think I saw it was reported at like 4,300 or something for attendance. So the Notre Dame fans not responding very well to Micah Shrewsbury's rant and call to action. They took action. The action was staying home and not going to the game. So that's going to be, probably a situation I would imagine on Saturday where the crowd will be even smaller. Maybe you get a little boost from having the game on a Saturday afternoon. But right now, obviously, the Irish fans are largely checked out on this team. So you should be able to avoid any kind of home court advantage. The key for Pitt on Saturday will be not giving Notre Dame a home court advantage. And the way you give Notre Dame a home court advantage is by falling behind by double digits in the first half, which we know this Pitt team is all too prone to do. You can't fall behind by double digits in the first half. You can't, get into that kind of hole, which they've been doing over and over again, really like clockwork. Because if you do that, you give Notre Dame, who is not very good, some life. You give them something to sort of, feel good about. And maybe the small crowd that's there, you give them some life as well. And you don't want the crowd to get behind it. You don't want the crowd to start getting some momentum for that team, because then you start putting yourself in position to potentially lose. Now, this Pitt basketball team, for whatever reason, and there are probably many, falls behind every game. Like, we know that. They've been down double digits in like 8 different ACC games in the first half, including the game against Syracuse, including the game. Miami, they didn't go down by double digits, but they were down. They've been down a lot. They were down 16 against Syracuse in the first half. They came back and won that game. They were down 16 against Cal in the first half. They came back and won that game, but they were also down like 20 in the first half against Virginia and SMU, and they did not come back and win those games. And so it's not exactly something you want to make a habit out of. I would say it's past the point of being a habit. It's now a defining trait. I think somebody, the DT Pitt on the message board, said it's turned from, it's not a trend anymore. It's a trait. And that's probably the best, but that's what this team does. They need to avoid it as much as possible on Saturday at Notre Dame. You're going to fall behind. Maybe you could just keep it to like 6 points, maybe 8, something like that. Keep it somewhat manageable and not have to do this thing where you hope to cut it to only 6 by halftime, and then you can give yourself a chance in the second half. It'd be nice for this team to just avoid that, but 26 games in, we kind of know who they are, and I think for a lot of people, myself included, you keep waiting for that time where this team, the light bulb turns on and they really turn it around. They start playing to their potential, and they really coalesce and gel, and it all starts clicking for them. And I keep waiting for it, and you keep waiting for it, for that complete game, for that just for the team to truly live up to who we think they can be and who we think they should be. We keep waiting for it, but it's 26 games now. Yeah, like, they've been playing a lot of basketball. I think we have a pretty clear idea of who this team is. The big question is, can they put their best foot forward enough in the final 5 games to win all 5? We have an ongoing conversation on the message boards right now about Pitt's paths to the NCAA tournament. And I know, like, some of the instant reaction is, are you kidding? They're never going to do it. They won't be able to win enough. They won't be able to. Okay, fine. Like, let's talk less about, or at least we can save the conversation about whether they can do these things. And let's just talk about what things they would need to do to get to the NCAA tournament. Now, obviously, winning the ACC tournament is a heck of a place to start. You if you do that, then it doesn't matter what you do in the next 5 games. So that would be great. Obviously, if we can endorse a course of action, it would be winning the ACC tournament. Short of that, I think winning out in the final 5 games of the regular season should be enough. I think when you look at the entirety of Pitt's resume, if they do that, right? And again, just pause for a second on the conversation about whether they can do it. And let's just talk about if they're able to do it, what would it mean? And I think when you look at where their resume would be after those 5 games, if they win these next 5, right, where you get 2 more quad 2 wins on the road at Notre Dame and at NC State, you get another quad 1 win on the road at Louisville, and you avoid taking any more bad losses. You don't lose to Boston College, you don't lose to Georgia Tech, and you enter the postseason in the conference tournament with only 1 loss to a quad 3 or quad 4 team, or a quad 3 or quad 4 game. I think that resume should be strong enough. I think when you look at non-conference strength of schedule and some of those other things that were held against Pitt last year, too many bad losses, really bad non-conference strength of schedule, they've corrected some of that. And if they were to win out, if they were to win these final 5 games, I think they would have effectively corrected. They already corrected the non-conference strength of schedule. That part is taken care of. But I think if they were to win these final 5 games, they would correct the problem of too many bad losses, which was held against Pitt last year. They didn't have enough good losses to offset the bad, or good wins to offset the bad losses. with the complicating factor of the non-conference strength of schedule. Now they have a top 60 non-conference strength of schedule, top 60 overall strength of schedule. They've only got that one loss in the quad 3, quad 4 games. Right now, they only have one win in quad 1 games, but they're, I think, 3-1 in quad 2 games. If they were to win out, they would get 2 more wins there. So they'd be 5-1 in quad 2 games. They'd be 2-8 in quad 1 games. So you're looking at, 6-9, 7-9, 7-9 in quad 1, quad 2 games. I think that might be enough. And there were teams last year that had losing records in quad 1 and quad 2 games combined. Like Pitt, they might be like 2-8 or something like that in quad 1 games. And they still made the tournament because their resume was strong enough across the board. No, 0 or 1 bad losses, a good, strong non-conference strength of schedule, all those things, which Pitt should be able to, amass. They should be able to put together a resume like that if they can win these Final Five. Now, again, we can get into the conversation of what they need to do to win these Final Five, but just on the surface level of like, is there a path for this team to the NCAA tournament aside from winning the ACC tournament? I think it's winning out in the regular season. Unlikely, as that may be, I think that's the path. Is this team talented enough to win the Final 5 games? I think they are. Are they talented enough to go on a 7-game winning streak to close the season? I think they are. Have they shown themselves to be capable of doing so? In flashes, yes. On a consistent basis, and I mean like for an entire half or an entire game or an entire stretch of games, no. But the potential is still there. And one thing I keep saying is, the door is still open. It's slightly ajar. Not a lot. It's just a sliver of light, but it's still there. The door is not closed. Nobody locked the deadbolt. So it's the possibility still exists. You just have to, we'll see if they can pull it off. But I think it's important to consider that they've got a path. They've got a path if they can pull it off. Let's see here. We got a super chatter right off the bat. Michael B, we appreciate you, sir. Says, hi, Chris. Just an FYI, I prefer Knights. Quick question. Do you think the Twins will be back next season? What about Delilich and Lowe? What's your gut say? Also, will Jeff Cable be forced to finally change his staff? Thanks. A couple of questions in there. I don't know who's going to come back. Like, I really can't predict that kind of thing. Some guys might already have that decision made up in their minds, one way or the other. Some guys might be really just kind of putting it off until after the season, and they'll decide then. Some guys might have their minds made up, and then they'll change their minds after the season. I don't know. I think the Twins really like being here. I think they like being part of this program. I think they like Pittsburgh. Ditto for Jalen Lowe. I don't know about Delilich. And that's not like some like wink way of saying like, oh, he's going to be leaving. I just don't know. I just don't know. I don't have any real insight there. Some guys will go, some guys won't. I think some of the guys who are not playing will probably go, whether that includes a guy like, I'm guessing the Twins wouldn't split up, right? So if we start there and we say, well, Guillermo's got a very defined and significant role. And Jorge has the potential to get a significant role. I would guess that should portend well for them staying, but it's just tough to predict. I just don't know. Some of it will be, obviously the strength of the NIL program is going to be a relevant factor, but also the culture that's in the program right now, the culture that's in the locker room will go a long way. So you had a situation last year where Bub Carrington wasn't deciding between Pitt, NBA, or transfer. He was deciding between Pitt and the NBA. That was the decision that Bub Carrington had to make. So much so that, he was that committed to Pitt's locker room that I'm pretty sure it has been rather credibly reported that if Bub Carrington would have come back, he probably would have taken less NIL money in the hopes that NIL money could be spread around so that they could add more players around him if he were to come back. And I think that's a testament to, it's, to Bub, he's a good kid, but it's a testament to the culture, and it's a testament to the program that's been built, that players want to be here and be a part of it. We've talked a lot about the hometown discounts on the football side and the basketball side that players have taken and had to take or didn't have to take, but players have chosen to take in the offseason to return to Pitt over the last few years. This current offseason, for football included, the last couple of years for football and basketball, they've probably, there have been a bunch of guys who probably could have gotten more money somewhere else, but they chose to stay. And I think that is a testament to these programs and where they're at and what they've got going on and what kind of has been built. And so that should work in Pitt's favor. I know there's some indications or some suggestions or rumors that maybe the locker room is struggling right now. I think that's entirely possible, or at least it certainly was during the 2 4-game losing streaks. They lost 8 out of 10 games. I'm sure the locker room was struggling. Everybody was struggling. The fan base was struggling. The coaches probably were struggling too, because nobody likes to lose that much. But the strength of that locker room could come through if they can rally here and find some success. To your other questions, will Jeff Capel be forced to finally change his staff? I don't know. Like I continue to say, I don't, that I think it's really interesting that there have been 0 staff changes. I mean, for the core assistant coaches, they've added guys over the years, and they've lost some guys here and there, but those core guys, Tim O'Toole and Milan Brown and Jason Capel, who were here from the start, they're still here, and it's remarkable. You don't see that kind of stability and longevity for a coaching staff hardly ever. And I think Jeff Capel said last year that those guys had opportunities to go and they decided to stay and this and that. I'm personally, to your question, I'm personally of the mind that outside of a really compelling, identifiable, legally documented reason, I'm not a big fan of athletic directors or general managers in pro sports forcing a staff change. You've got to fire this assistant coach. I've long believed and I've long felt that, in sort of the hierarchy of things, the ladder of how everything sort of works, you've got the athletic director whose job is to hire the head coaches. And their job is to hire the head coach that they feel gives them will do the best job building a program. And part of that program building is hiring an assistant coaching staff. And you hire the head coach is as an athletic director or GM, you hire a head coach with the understanding that, look, you are responsible for the product that goes out. You are responsible for the successes and the failures here. And you need to, we'll give you whatever resources we can, but you need to build this program in such a way to give it a chance to have success. And that covers all areas. That covers your recruiting, that covers your facilities, that covers your practice schedules, that covers your assistant coaching staff. And so ultimately you are held accountable. So rather than walking into the office or calling him into the office and saying, Jeff, you missed the tournament 2 years in a row. We think you should have been good enough to make the tournament, but you didn't. So somebody's head has to roll. We want our pound of flesh. You can pick. You want it Jason, Milan, Tim. It doesn't matter to us. Somebody's got to go. That's just asking for somebody to be the scapegoat. Unless, again, there's some clear, obvious, identifiable issue, legally documentable issue that you have to fire this guy. If I was an athletic director, I wouldn't suggest that I know the inner workings of the program well enough to say this is the assistant coach who's causing the trouble. Again, unless there's reports have been made and HR issues and things like that. So you let the head coach make those decisions because you hired the head coach to make those decisions. And if you start forcing actions or decisions on the head coach, I think you start sowing the seeds of a bad relationship between the head coach and the athletic director. I think it has to flow down. The chancellor is not going to tell, I don't think the chancellor should tell the AD to fire a coach, but the AD should understand that the chancellor expects the AD to have the athletic department operating at a certain level. Similarly, I don't think an athletic director should tell a head coach, fire this assistant. I think the athletic director should tell the head coach, you are responsible for getting success. And if this is the staff you believe will lead to success, okay. But you are ultimately the one who will be held accountable for this program's success or failures. And so a long-winded way of answering, like, I don't know what Alan Green's perspective is on that, but that's always been my take. That I just don't think you gain all that much by forcing a staff change. Like, you can have conversations about it. You could say, like, hey, it really seems like our offense didn't take a step forward this year. You're talking to the football coach about the offensive coordinator. It really seems like, do you feel like our offense should have maybe been a little bit better? What's your take on that situation? Like, give me your review on how your offensive coordinator performed this year. And then you can have a conversation like that. But I think there's far more downside than there is upside in walking in and saying, you need to fire this guy. For performance reasons, not for like HR issues and things like that. You need to fire this guy. I think he's doing a bad job for you. I can pick your coaching staff better than you can. Well, if you can pick the coaching staff better, then you should be the head coach. But that's always just sort of been my take. I think you breed animosity if you do it that way. I'm not a big fan of it. But thanks for your question, though. I appreciate it. I think if Jeff Capel changes his coaching staff, I think it'll be his decision. I don't think Alan Green will force it. Let's go. Some more comments and questions here. I want to. So this is interesting. Bridger Carrier says, winning out. If Pitt wins out in the regular season, they'd be 21-10 like they were last year. Yeah, so 21-10 would be the record. But I think there are some important distinctions between Pitt basketball this year and Pitt basketball last year, even if they end up with the same or similar record. Because I don't think you can just look at it and say, well, Pitt had the same record last year and they got left out of the NCAA tournament. Why do you think that record would get them in this year? I don't think you can look at it that way because, I think that's missing the point of why they got left out. I think there were a couple main reasons why they got left out last season. One big one, like I said, was the non-conference strength of schedule. It would keep that in mind, that the non-conference strength of schedule was an issue that was held against Pitt. They had some bad losses, like Syracuse at home, obviously the Missouri game, and I think, is there a Miami game that they lost that could have been a nice, I forget if that was a quad 2 or quad 3, but they had some bad losses, not enough good wins to overcome those bad losses, and then they had that bad non-conference strength of schedule, which ultimately got held against them. You can win enough and get enough good wins in your conference and post a big record, really impressive record, single-digit losses, and that can overcome the non-conference strength of schedule. But if you've got a questionable resume, which is where Pitt was last season, it's where they sort of are right now, then some of those other factors start to play into it. Non-conference strength of schedule, which you have control over in terms of who you put on the schedule. You don't have quite as much control over how those teams do. I think Pitt expected Missouri to be better and expected West Virginia to be better last year. But that non-conference strength of schedule starts to become a factor when the resume is questionable. And teams that have questionable resumes, either in terms of their quad 1, quad 2 record or whatever else it might be, the predictive metrics or analytics, those teams with the questionable resumes, you start looking at those other factors like non-conference strength of schedule. And whereas that was held against Pitt last year and they got no favors from it, this year it's a positive for them. Like I said, I think it's top 55, top 60 non-conference strength of schedule, which, I think they were in the 200s last year. It's a significant improvement. So if they end up, don't just think about the record. Oh, they were 21-10 last year. They're 21-10 this year. It's so much deeper than that. There's so many more factors to consider than that. And so if they're able to win out here and get to, 7-9 in quad 1, quad 2 games with only one quad 3, quad 4 loss and a top 60 non-conference strength of schedule, the resume and the profile look very, very different from last year's team, which ended up with the same regular season record, but had a very different type of resume, which is ultimately why they got left out. And so I think that gives them a better chance. And Bridger Carrier goes on and says, I think they probably need at least one win in the ACC tournament. And there's an ongoing conversation about that on the message boards right now that we've been having about, the conference tournaments. And I'm not going to say that the conference tournaments don't matter, but I do feel like the committee has historically put a little bit less credence or put a little less weight on those mid-tournament games. Like, obviously, if you win your conference tournament, then you're in. So that one matters. And maybe making it to the conference championship game could be relevant as well. But, like, winning a game on Wednesday, winning a game on Thursday, I mean, set aside the fact that, there's like a limited sample of teams that Pitt could even face in the ACC tournament that would count as quad 2 games, let alone quad 1. Like, set that aside for a second. But, like, winning a game on Wednesday, winning a game on Thursday, I'm just not sure that it's going to move the needle all that much on a neutral court in the conference tournament setting. I don't know that it's going to move the needle all that much for the committee. If you go out, like, if they go 4-1, let's say they go 4-1, the only loss is the game at Louisville. They'd be 20-11, right, at the end of the regular season. Still no bad losses, only one quad 1 win. They'd be 6-10 or whatever it is. I guess 6-10 against quad 1, quad 2 games, as opposed to 7-9 like we were talking about. But, like, let's say they do that, right? And then on whatever day would be their first game in the ACC tournament, Wednesday or something, they beat whoever, like a Georgia Tech or somebody like that. Like, that's not gonna do it. That's not gonna offset anything. That's not going to change anything. Whereas I think if they go into the ACC tournament at 21-10, with those wins that I talked about, the 7-9 record against quad 1, quad 2, only one quad 3 loss, no quad 4 losses, a top 60 non-conference strength of schedule. There again, I think the resume is strong enough, might be strong enough. And I don't think that Wednesday win over Georgia Tech or somebody is going to change anything about that. And I don't think a Thursday win over Wake Forest would change anything about that. Like, just hypothetically who they might face. Like, I don't think it moves the needle all that much. I think your resume, Pitt's resume at that point, will be largely kind of set. Unless they get to the ACC championship game and potentially win it, then it's a different conversation. I just don't think it moves the needle all that much for the selection committee. To some extent, I think by the time they get to the conference tournament week, I think most of the at-large bids, they've more or less got them penciled in. And so there's not much that changes. Now you have to watch out for those bid stealers. You have to watch out where the penciled in tournament team loses in its conference tournament. And that's going to, that'll affect the chances for a team like Pitt. And that was certainly the case last year. I think Jeff Capel even said by like Saturday, he had a pretty good sense that they weren't going to make it because of how some of the conference tournaments had played out. With a team like NC State making a run or Duquesne making a run. That ends up stealing some of the spots for a team like Pitt, regardless of what they do in the ACC tournament, short of winning the whole thing. I think Pitt's paths, I think there's two. I think you win out in the regular season or I should say, you win the ACC tournament. And I'm not sure that, if you fall short of both of those, if you go 4-1 in the regular season and only win 1 or 2 games in the ACC tournament, I don't think you get in. I don't think it happens. Let's scroll through here. See what else you guys are talking about this morning. Scotty Trotter says, do we know the NIL needs for the basketball team? I mean, it's money. As Jeff Capel said, they need money. Numbers wise, I don't know. I mean, I don't think you're looking at 7 figures for a single player. Not anybody that's going to end up at Pitt, but you're looking at solid 6 figures for most of the key guys to come back, and then any key pieces that you would add in. You're probably looking at like 6 figures. So you're going to get into 7 figures on the whole payroll, if we want to call it that, NIL wise. But I don't think any individual player is probably going to command that much. I think you're gonna stick in that 6 figure range. Pitt Tough Guy says, any word on how much of the annual $20.5 million player pay Pitt will hit? Where's the money coming from? Layoffs in the athletic department and coaches in Olympic sports and yanking scholarship seems inevitable. No? Thanks. Yeah, from the time that revenue sharing was announced, from the time that the House settlement first started getting discussed and becoming a reality and some of these numbers came out, it became clear because there's the revenue sharing number, right? The 20.5 million. And then there's also like the back pay, right? I think they're still doing that. I forget if I forget if we I don't think anything's changed with that. Nobody I don't remember. I feel like I haven't seen anybody mention it recently, like back pay for other former players. That's the word I'm like struggling with because I forgot what the amount was, but it was going to be an amount that was going to be divvied up. Every school was going to have to kick in a certain amount. So you've got the revenue sharing that you have to do. You've got the back pay for former student athletes that you've got to take care of. And then you're going to potentially have more scholarships, right? Because, these changed scholarship limits for football, for all the sports, really. So you're going to have more money invested there. And all of this is money that's still coming out of the same pot that your money came out of in, 2024-25. The last school year, it's not like your budget is changing. It's not like somehow you're getting a giant influx of 35 million new dollars every year that you're going to be able to use to cover for this. So from the time all of this was announced, from the time the House settlement first kind of became a reality or a likelihood, I mean, we started in the kind of dark and cynical path of, okay, where are they going to get this money from? And what are they going to have to cut in order to do it? And we've talked about like programs could be cut. Staffers could be cut. I mean, I think you look around college sports, you're seeing schools cutting sports. I think Ohio State, what do they cut? Gymnastics or something. I think Indiana announced a bunch of like administrative cuts, just thinning the herd. I don't want to say trimming the fat because I think it's disrespectful to those people who lost their jobs, got fired or laid off. But at some point, you've got a balance sheet and you've got to look at it and say, okay, where are we going to find the money to do this or to do that? And like the number one priority, it's always going to come down. If you want to win, you need to have the players. And in this current environment, if you want to have the players, you better be able to come up with the revenue sharing money. Like that money has to go out. I think if you want to keep yourself among, the top schools, the Power Four conferences and all that kind of thing, like you are going to have to be right up to that cap. Yeah, I really think so. And so that money's got to come from somewhere. It's got to, you got to find it. And, unfortunately, it means cutting things and cutting people and cutting positions. And every school is facing this. Every school is going to have to figure this out. Alan Green, I think, said when he had an interview with Pat Bostic on The Fan that, they still need to see the specifics of how this is going to look, but they are working on a plan. They've got a plan put together. Like I would be concerned if I was affiliated with certain programs, programs that you look at and you say, okay, how much is this program costing Pitt to operate? And what is the likelihood of this program succeeding? And for some of these programs, the likelihood is not necessarily high. And I don't think you just look at recent successes. Oh, this team was good last year. This team was bad last year. You look at overall, like realistically, what is the ceiling for this program? Where can it get? And how much is this program costing? And how much of the money we're investing in that program, which is highly unlikely to succeed, how much of that money can we use toward revenue sharing, back pay, scholarships, school funded NIL, like all the things that you are now going to have to spend money on if you want to stay competitive. So I think Pitt will expect and should expect to foot the whole revenue sharing bill. I think they're going to have to get mighty crafty to find a way to generate those dollars. I think there are going to be some hard decisions made. I think there are going to be some tough cuts. I think there are going to be cuts, like I say, to administrative positions. I think there are going to be cuts to programs. And I think the university is going to have to be involved as well. I don't think it's just going to be an athletic department endeavor. I think the university is going to have to get on the hook for some of these dollars, because I just don't see the athletic department, I should say. I don't see the athletic department coming up with 25 million next year when they're already in the red. Like, I don't know how you're going to come up with that kind of money. And so it's going to be tricky. This is why they get paid the big bucks, because they got to figure this out. They have to find a way to generate this money. Let's see. Scrolling through here. If you want to join the conversation, of course, get in the chat screen over there. You can post your comments or your questions. Let's see here. So Bridger Carrier, I think, talking about the ACC tournament, says it depends who they lose to. It could be a bad loss or a loss to someone that takes their spot. See, but there again, I if we're talking about, if we're talking about, the ACC tournament and how it affects the NCAA tournament, I just don't know. I don't think so. I don't think, like, and I mean, I could end up being completely wrong. If they end up in the NCAA or the ACC tournament, they lose to like a Virginia or somebody like that. Maybe that would be enough to knock them out. I think the regular season is going to be the chief. The regular season is going to be kind of the primary resume that's considered, and that's ultimately what will determine if teams get in or don't. On the topic of, like, I said that there's the two paths to take, and, we have a conversation about those paths and maybe put off the conversation about how they could, if they could actually do it. On that topic, like, can they win out? Can they win these final 5 games? It's tough because they have times where they look like a team that could pull it off. You know what I mean? Like a decent chunk of the Miami game, a decent chunk of the Syracuse game, a decent chunk of, like, the Clemson game. A decent chunk of the Louisville game, a decent chunk. I mean, shoot, they almost made it competitive with Duke for a while there in the second half before they just stopped scoring for the final 8 minutes. They've had stretches. And I think on a sort of individual level, this team is talented enough to win. I talked about this earlier this week, that coming out of the Syracuse game, I guess, so I probably talked about it on yesterday's morning Pitt. There's some encouraging signs. There's some encouraging signs about what they could be and the direction they're headed. I think there are some key players surging at the right time. I think Ishmael Leggett is playing at a really high level right now. I think Zach Austin is playing really well in the last 2 games. And that might be a little bit tougher to repeat. We can talk about Austin in a second. I think Jalen Lowe is really interesting to me right now because he sat out that game on Saturday, the Miami game, with a concussion that he suffered in the SMU game. And he sat out and he watched. And he watched as Pitt had, Pitt's ball movement on Saturday was as good as it's been all season. I mean, it was just a lot of passing, sharp cutting. They were aggressive in how they cut to the hoop. They, getting off of screens and rolling and passing and just moving the ball. And Jalen Lowe watched that. And, they had fewer assists on Tuesday night. So it's not like, just totally carried over. And because I think in the Miami game, I think they had 15 assists on 25 made baskets. I think they only had 12 on 26 against Syracuse. So it's not like, huge stat. But they did move the ball better. They had some sloppy turnovers in both halves. But they moved the ball better than they had been. And I even asked Jeff Capel about it after the game of, like, do you feel like sitting and watching was helpful for Jalen? Do you think it changed his perspective maybe a little bit or gave him a different perspective on what he was seeing and how it looked? And he said he didn't know. He sort of assumed it did, but he wasn't really sure. And I get that. But I'm curious to see how Lowe plays going forward because I thought he played really well on Tuesday night. I thought he passed well. I thought he was a little bit more, I don't want to say patient, but I thought he picked his shots better than he had been. He was 5 of 10. It was only like one of 3 or 4 games all season where he shot 50% from the floor. And I think maybe the first or second time in an ACC game that he's done it. And so he, uh, I thought he played better. He still only ended up with a few assists, but minimal turnovers and just better shot selection, more efficient shooting, more efficient shot selection. And that's what they need from Jalen Lowe. That's what they need him to be. And when he's been an issue, when the team has been struggling, he's probably been overshooting a bit. You know what I mean? Taking too many shots and just not very efficient shots, kind of hope and a prayer type of shots that he hopes it can go in so it can give the team an extra spark or something like that. And that's just not really a good way to operate. But on Tuesday, excuse me, I thought he looked a little bit more understanding in his role, or of his role, I guess I should say. And so I'm really curious about this going into Saturday. I don't know how much better his defense is going to get, but in terms of running the offense, in terms of how he picks his shots, in terms of the passes, in terms of the efficiency of shooting, if Lowe can start stacking games like Tuesday night and do that a couple times in a row, this team can be dangerous. If Ishmael Leggett keeps playing like he's been playing, and I think he's shooting 48% or something over the last 2 games, averaging 20 points per game. He's got like 17 rebounds or something like that, and a bunch of assists. He tied his career high in assists with 5 against Miami. If he can keep playing like that too, like these are the things that we said at the beginning of the season, right? These were the elements that people were counting on. These were the elements that we thought would carry this team this year, that Lowe and Leggett would play at a really high level. For whatever else we said or expected or thought Cam Corrin would do or Guillermo Diaz-Graham would do or Zach Austin or Damian Dunn or the freshmen or anything like that, it always started at the top of the pyramid with Lowe and Leggett playing really well and carrying the team. Like it was, the offseason debate about, is it Jalen's team or Ish's team? I mean, that was what we were talking about, because those two guys were clearly the top of the pyramid. And so right now, there's a chance that they're both trending in the right direction. There's a chance that they're both heading toward playing at that level consistently, because they have. Leggett has over the last 2 games, and Lowe did in his game when he returned after sitting out for a game. Maybe that becomes like the turning point. I said it at the beginning. They're like, almost past the point of waiting for that turning point to happen. Well, maybe Jalen Lowe sitting out a game was the turning point. Maybe Jalen Lowe sitting out a game is what sort of, gives him a new perspective on how the offense should be working, what his role in it can be, and what he needs to do to give this team a real chance to win. Maybe we look back and we say, yeah, when Lowe sat out that Miami game, came back a whole new player, and look at how the team played moving forward. There's still the issue of figuring out Guillermo Diaz-Graham and Cam Corrin. It doesn't seem all that difficult, but I mean, I think what we saw on Tuesday night was a little bit closer to what it probably should be, in terms of almost a 50-50 split of minutes at the 5 with Guillermo and Cam Corrin, particularly in the second half. That's what they did. It's probably what they should continue doing. Somebody on the board suggested that starting lineup going forward should be the 3 guards, Lowe, Leggett, and Brandon Cummings, along with Zach Austin and Cam Corrin, and then Guillermo is the first sub off the bench. My only thing with that is, you're sort of, if you want to get into a straight platoon at the center position between Guillermo and Cam Corrin, then you're really limited in your options at the 4, unless you start getting bigger minutes for Amsal Delilich and Jorge Diaz-Graham. And Amsal, I would say, is playing more 3 and 2 and 1 than he's playing 4. And Guillermo or Jorge also is playing more 3, although the 3 and 4 are pretty interchangeable for this team. I just feel like, even though they're not going to take Zach Austin off the court much at all, and understandably so, I feel like you're limiting your options if you don't use Guillermo out there, at least for a little while, where you can move around and get different lineup looks. I think at one point they had on Tuesday night, I feel like both Diaz-Graham twins plus Amsal, maybe plus Zach Austin. I think it might have been. It was a wild lineup out there. It was a wild lineup. What else on that? Brandon Cummings and Amsal Delilich getting more minutes. Need to see them keep playing. I think Cummings has certainly earned more minutes. I think when Damian Dunn went out, it created a void, right? Somebody had to fill those minutes. And it sort of seems like, well, whoever's playing better, Cummings or Delilich, that's the guy who's going to get it. When Lowe was out on Saturday, then both of those guys were able to get ample minutes. With Lowe back in, you're now splitting the Dunn minutes between Cummings and Delalich. And I think it'll probably be the hot hand, which will probably be, I think it'll probably be Cummings more often than not. You guys know how I feel about Delalich. I'd like to see Upsall Delalich out there, but it's Cummings is certainly playing well. Let's get a couple more comments and questions here before we get out. Julianne Martin says, if they continue to start slow, they won't win out. Can't do 5 more comebacks in a row, especially at Louisville, Notre Dame, and NC State. Absolutely. Like at some point, they've got to figure out a way to start a little bit quicker. At some point, they've got to have a game where they are actually the better team in the first half. I don't know when that is. I don't know when that's going to happen. They've had a number of games where they've finished the first half as the better team, where they've been the better team going into halftime, and they've taken the momentum. But usually, they're still trailing and having to play from a deficit. They've got to get that figured out. I mean, you're absolutely right. You can't go to Louisville for sure, and and be down 12 in the first half. And you're putting yourself in significant jeopardy if you go to Notre Dame and NC State and you're down 12 or 14 in the first half or 10. You've got to keep that lead. You just can't dig that kind of hole. And I don't know what changes. I don't know what the answer is. Somebody asked, somewhere, why do they keep starting slow? I have no idea. Jeff Capel has no idea. For whatever reason, this team cannot. They just struggle. They miss baskets. Tuesday night, they committed a bunch of turnovers. They were just really sloppy with the ball. They weren't playing well on defense, weren't closing out on threes, although that's something they do all 40 minutes. That's not unique to the first half. Syracuse was able to make a bunch of threes, and that was a big difference in that game, how it got so lopsided in the first half. But I don't know what the answer is. And because I don't know what the answer is, or if there's a specific answer in the first half, I don't really know how Pitt fixes it other than just go play better. Like be focused, be ready to play right out of the gate. Dave Yark says, if Pitt wins out in the last 5 games, I think they're in no matter what they do in the ACC tournament, because Virginia would be their only really bad loss, right? Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Dave. I mean, that's my big thought on it. Win out, your resume should be good enough. Win out in the regular season, and your resume should be good enough to get you in without, regardless of what happens in the ACC tournament. That's my thought, but we'll see. It can feel impossible to guess what the tournament selection committee is going to do. Dave also says, oh, and if Amsal didn't start 0 of 4 and look a little shaky in that one break, he would have played more than 11 minutes. I think so. But because he did, that sort of left the door open for Brandon Cummings to get those extra minutes and then play well and earn his time in the second half. And once they subbed like once in the second half, other than the center rotation. But once they subbed Cummings in, I mean, those 4 guys, Lowe, Leggett, Cummings, and Austin, were pretty much on the court for the entire final 17 minutes or so. There wasn't a lot of subbing at that point because, particularly in the second half, I think once Jeff Capel finds a group that he feels like is working well, kind of just sticks with them. All right. Bridger Carrier will give you the last word here. Says, if they win out, they finish 7 and play a team like Georgia Tech, Virginia, or Notre Dame. Risky to finish the season on a loss like that on the bubble when other teams can stack more quad 1 wins. I mean, like, you're right. It's just my feeling and impression that they just, the committee just doesn't rate those games or weigh those games as heavily as they do the regular season. And so if there's a team on the bubble, I think things like their, the non-conference strength of schedule and that kind of thing is what will ultimately have the biggest impact, bigger than, what they do in their conference tournament, short of, again, winning it. All right, a couple more here. Joe Brennan says this team should be who has the hot hand on a per-game basis between the guard rotation. That includes Lowe and Ish. I think it is the hot hand, but those 2 guys are pretty much, they're kind of exempt from it. Unless you have like 5 other guys who are all playing at a really, really high level, I think those 2 are kind of exempt from the hot hand because they can become the hot hand at any time. Pitt Tough Guy says the NCAA back pay is $2.78 billion. NCAA will pay by deducting from distributions programs would otherwise receive. Right, yeah. So that back pay for the former student athletes is another number you've got to come up with, in addition to the 20.5, in addition to what you're going to pay in extra scholarships. So it's all coming out of a budget that hasn't increased nearly enough to cover all of these extra expenses, which means you got to find ways to make cuts. All right, Ethan Andre is a super chatter. Final one here says, if you could add one player from a past Pitt team to this team, who would it be? The answer is always DeJuan Blair. Like, whatever the team you're talking about, whatever the year you're talking about, the answer is always, for me, is always DeJuan Blair. DeJuan Blair was one of one. There's never been another DeJuan Blair. There never will be another DeJuan Blair. He is one of the most unique players I've ever seen. And, like, any of your sort of sports hypotheticals, who's the guy you want to take with you into a dark alley? DeJuan Blair. Who's the guy you would add to another team? DeJuan Blair. Who's the guy who could probably be an all-star at another sport? DeJuan Blair. You think DeJuan Blair couldn't be a pass rusher? Oh, my God, he would kill guys out there at defensive end. You know? DeJuan Blair is always the answer. There's that old quote Bill Graham had about the Grateful Dead, that they're not the best at what they do. They're the only ones who do what they do. DeJuan Blair wasn't the best at what he did. He was the only one who did what he did. And so you always take him, even if the game is different now than it was 20 years ago or 15 years ago when DeJuan played. Like, you always take DeJuan Blair, because you put him on this team, and now you've got somebody who will actually be physical and battle under the hoop, rebound, finish. Like, the answer is always DeJuan Blair. One of the best things they're doing at the Peterson Event Center this year is these like look backs. And maybe they did it last year and I'm just forgetting. They're often narrated by our friend EJ Borghetti, who does a great job with it. Looking back on like big moments in Peterson Event Center history. And when they show highlights, I mean, watch those things. When they show highlights of DeJuan Blair, you're just reminded, like, oh yeah, this dude ruled. Like, he was legitimately awesome. And the whole nation knew he was awesome. And that's, you know, we missed DeJuan Blair facing off with Tyler Hansbrough in the Final Four. You know, that's what we missed, and that's what we should have gotten. And it would have been an epic battle. Not for that damn Scotty Reynolds. All right. You know, it's always time to move on when we when we reference Scotty Reynolds and start invoking that game. But look, thanks everybody for tuning in here on a Thursday morning. I appreciate it. I know we switched up the schedule a little bit, but this was fun. It's daylight out. It's not warm, but it's light out outside, so it's a little bit different. We'll probably get back to our regular Wednesday nights, but I appreciate everybody who tuned in this morning for a little Pitt conversation. Don't forget to check out the Morning Pitt, where we got some football talk today right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And of course, we'll have the Morning Pitt mailbag tomorrow. So if you're a subscriber at Panther-Lair.com, head over there, post a question in the mailbag thread. So we have some good content to discuss, some good topics to discuss tomorrow. So tune in for that. Right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right. Like this video and subscribe. Thanks for everybody for watching. Thanks for commenting. I hope you have a great rest of your Thursday, and we will catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pitt mailbag right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.